This homeless man, who survived to death thanks to the help of a kind girl, turned out to be the billionaire heir of the Jones Group. And all of this has to start from his 6-month undercover mission. The man before me is named Simon and is the sole heir of the world's top conglomerate, the Jones Group. In order to gather evidence of his uncle's embezzlement of the company's property, he disguised himself as a homeless vagrant and lurked on the streets for a full half a year. Now that the evidence is conclusive and his uncle is behind bars, Simon can finally restore his true identity. Louis, the personal assistant, had been waiting for a long time to welcome the boss's return. However, just before returning to the group, Simon halted the team, stating that there was still one most important thing left unfinished. The scene shifted, and Simon was still wearing that tattered outfit, squatting at the familiar street corner. Not far away, a kind girl was walking towards him. She was Simon's beloved benefactor, Victoria, who worked at a fast food restaurant. During the 6 months when Simon was an undercover agent, the whole world kept away from him. Only Victoria would pay out of her own pocket every day to bring him steaming hot hamburgers and clean drinking water. Her kindness was the only light for Simon during his most desperate days. Today, Victoria delivered the hamburgers as usual. Simon looked at the angelic girl before him, his heart filled with a myriad of emotions. He decided not to hide anything anymore and was ready to confess his true identity to Victoria and offer her a huge reward. Just as he was about to speak, Victoria's phone rang inappropriately. The call was from Victoria's mother, bringing bad news. Her elderly grandmother was critically ill and might not make it through this Christmas. The only wish of the old man was to see Victoria in her wedding dress with his own eyes, to reassure her mother and grandmother. Victoria could only tell a white lie, claiming that her fiancé, Carl, had proposed to her and that they would go to get their marriage certificate tomorrow and the wedding would be held soon. The mother on the other end of the phone believed it to be true and immediately decided to hold their wedding on Christmas. Simon, who was standing by, heard all the conversations. The words he had prepared were instantly silenced. It turned out that the girl he regarded as a bright spot already had a partner, who was about to walk down the aisle. A huge sense of loss welled up in his heart. But seeing Victoria's slightly worried face after hanging up the phone, Simon could only swallow his true identity and emotions, force a smile and sincerely wish her a happy marriage. Victoria had no idea of the turmoil in a tramp's heart. After expressing her gratitude, she hurried back to the fast food restaurant to continue working. However, she never dreamed that a devastating betrayal was awaiting her. When Victoria pushed open the door of the fast food restaurant, she saw a scene that broke her heart. The fiancé she deeply loved, Carl, who was about to get married to her, was now hugging his own cousin, behaving very intimately. Victoria's mind went blank. She rushed forward to question Carl, reminding him that the two of them were going to get their marriage certificate the next day. Unexpectedly, this Phoenix man's fiancé showed a contemptuous look. He mercilessly shook off Victoria and smashed the cheap engagement ring hard to the ground. He roared, saying that Victoria was no longer worthy of him. He was disgusted that Victoria had been in New York for 3 years and was still just a waitress serving dishes. Mocking her for always wearing cheap old clothes and outdated cowboy boots, she looks like a country bumpkin. What's even more vicious is that the green tea cousin also came forward to add fuel to the fire. She boasted that Carl was now the department manager of the Jones Group's U.S. branch and an elite of the upper class. Victoria, however, was just a poor wretch from the countryside of Texas, only worthy of going home to herd cattle. Every word from this dog couple was like a poisoned knife, stabbing deeply into Victoria's heart. 3 years of affection only brought about ruthless humiliation and betrayal. Faced with the double stab from her fiancé and her own cousin, Victoria's entire sanity collapsed instantly. She picked up a cup of cola on the table and without hesitation splashed it on her cousin's hypocritical face. The cousin of green tea screamed and was about to pounce and fight, but was stopped by Carl at once. But what Victoria didn't know was that the man's obstruction at this moment was not out of a shred of guilt. He had no idea that the real boss of the company he had just been promoted to was precisely the homeless man who he looked down upon as the poor waiter and helped every day. When Simon learns that the white moonlight in his heart has been so trampled upon, what kind of earth-shattering storm of revenge will he stir up? Please enjoy the second part. This seemingly untidy homeless man is actually the richest man in the country, a billionaire CEO who everyone thought had died in an air crash half a year ago. And all of this began when he met this kind girl who had just been publicly abandoned by her fiancé. Look closely. This girl named Victoria was ruthlessly humiliated on the street by her ex-fiancé and his new love. That arrogant woman, with a look of contempt on her face, warned Victoria, this inferior person, not to touch her, fearing that she might catch some illness. Having said that, she walked away with the man who had deceived and toyed with women's feelings. Before leaving, she didn't forget to mock Victoria, saying that she and the dirty tramp beside her were of the same kind. What they didn't know was that the tramp they casually humiliated was none other than Simon, a billionaire CEO who was disguising his identity and experiencing life Looking at her ex's heartless back, Victoria couldn't hold back her tears any longer and broke down in tears. Simon silently stepped forward and handed the tissue, comforting the poor girl. In her grief, Victoria expressed her desperate situation. Her mother and grandmother had spent all their life savings on her wedding. Now that the marriage had fallen through, she simply couldn't account for it to her family. Just when Victoria was at her wit's end, Simon made a suggestion that shocked her. Marry him. Simon explained that this was only a temporary marriage, with the aim of allowing her family, especially her grandmother, to witness her happily walking down the aisle without any regrets. Faced with this absurd yet well-intentioned proposal, Victoria, at her wit's end, was stunned. Looking at the man in front of her, who was dressed in rags but had sincere eyes, she finally nodded, treating him as a kind-hearted person she had met by chance. She promised to dissolve their marriage immediately after the wedding and would never hold him back. So, the two came to the marriage registration office. To reassure her family, Victoria decided to complete the official procedures first. The registrar looked at the pair in front of him, the beautiful Victoria and the scruffy Simon, his eyes filled with suspicion and confusion. He repeatedly confirmed with Victoria whether she had made this decision under duress. Victoria, however, told him with unwavering determination that she was willing to marry Simon Jones. However, when the registrar entered the name Simon Jones into the system, the expression on his face froze instantly. He suddenly raised his head and stared fixedly at the homeless man in front of him, his voice trembling as he confirmed. Could he be the nationally renowned president of the Jones Group who died in the air crash half a year ago? That legendary richest man in the country. Looking at the jaw-dropping expression of the registrar, Vito *Li* thought something was wrong and had no idea that the husband she had casually picked up was actually someone who exceeded her imagination. After successfully obtaining the marriage certificate, the two officially became a legal couple. Simon felt that the time was right and was ready to confess his true identity to Victoria. But just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by Victoria. It turned out that Victoria, who had just experienced betrayal, thought Simon was trying to apologize for her poverty and hardship. Kind-hearted as she was, she immediately stated that she didn't care at all whether he was having bad luck or not. The only thing she valued were kindness and honesty. She could no longer bear any lies. Looking into Victoria's sincere yet vulnerable eyes, Simon swallowed back the words that were on the tip of his tongue. He realized that what the girl needed now was not the shock of being a billionaire, but a shoulder to lean on. He decided to hide his identity for the time being and confess everything to her at an appropriate time. Victoria had no idea of the turmoil in her husband's heart. She just looked at the homeless man in front of her with concern and gently invited him to come home with her, saying that he needed a hot bath. In this way, a hidden billionaire, posing as a homeless man, moved into his newlywed wife's home. While Simon was taking a bath in the bathroom, Victoria was sitting outside, her heart filled with mixed emotions, feeling as if all of this was just a dream. Just then, Simon's voice came from the bathroom. He needed a bottle of body wash. Victoria, holding the body wash she just bought, walked towards the bathroom door. When she was about to push the door open and enter, what scene would she see, and when will Simon's secret be revealed?